Pamela Thomas Harrington, an accomplished clinical quality professional. We're going to learn what that is today because I have never heard that. Accomplished clinical quality professional with over 15 years of comprehensive clinical management and leadership skills in quality assurance, mental health training, and compliance. Experiences include managing clinical operation processes, auditing sites and vendors inspection, training, supporting, and conducting clinical trials for research centers and biopharmaceutical companies. Ladies and gentlemen, please put please put your hands together. We know it's you, girl. Come on, creep on up here. Do that walk and walk, 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 walk and walk, 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 walk and walk. All right. Next is Chanel Gabriel. I know her as a poet. She told me she's not going to do a poem, but I wish she would because she's incredibly talented. Singer, multicultural education consultant, and a lupus patient, advocate from Brooklyn. Diagnosed with lupus in 2004, 20 years ago. Chanel has spoken alongside the president of NIH, featured on Lifetime Network and in USA Today on the importance of diversity in clinical trials. She's a member, are y'all listening to all this? I'm sorry, I got ADD, I hear a lot of chatter. She's a member of the Lupus Voices Council, Patient Advisory Board of the Lupus Accelerating Breakthroughs Consortium, that's a lot of words, and has lectured at hospitals and biopharma companies on patient engagement and diversity needs in healthcare. Chanel, come on up here and do a poem as you walk through the stage. And I am telling you, I ain't doing no poem. No, I thought you were here. And finally, that must be you. I think you all color coordinated these outfits. Look at God. We welcome Columbus Gaskin. Is that you? That's not you? Oh, wait, no, he's not here. They told me he's not here. They didn't tell me what your name is. Come on up here, girl. What's your name here? Hope what? Ventricelli. Hope Ventricelli. What are you going to do? You going to talk? Let's give it up for Hope Ventricelli. She's the best. Thank you, Hope. All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sticking around for our panel. We are thrilled to have you guys here. My name is Hope Ventricelli. I'm the Senior Manager of Events and Programs with CISCRP. I have two beautiful women here with me today talking about clinical research. I know we've heard a lot about that today. I want to share a couple perspectives. But quickly, I want to share a little video just about what the world might look like without clinical trials.
Are you open?
Yes, we are. Welcome to the MT Pharmacy. There's nothing on the shelves because we wanted to show what modern medicine would be like without clinical trials. Clinical trials are medical research studies involving patients. They can help discover new medicines or get improved versions of existing medicines. They help us find out if a treatment can work in patients. We'd like to fill these shelves a bit like how clinical trials fill the shelves in a regular pharmacy.
I picked cancer for my box because my mother was a victim of cancer. She died of the year 2008. I was the age of 9 years old.
I've actually never thought about the fact that without clinical trials, we wouldn't have any of the medicines that we take every single day.
CISCRP is the Center for Information and Study on Clinical Research Participation. We are a nonprofit. I'm sure many of you have spoken to my colleagues today over there. Give a little wave. We have Chanel. Why don't you introduce yourself, Chanel?
I'm a poet, I'm a singer, and I do a lot of different things, and I fuse all of those things. I fuse my life experience, including lupus, into my story about being diagnosed and living with a chronic illness. So.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for Chanel. And over to you, Pamela.
Sure. So actually, Malik was like, what does all that mean in my introduction?
Basically, in simple terms, what it means is that many years ago, I started in clinical research as an assistant. I had no idea really what that was going to mean for me, but what it meant was I had an opportunity to see clinical trials up front, work behind the scenes. And for a woman of color, this is very important because we have a historical kind of thought about clinical trials and that it's a setup and that they're not going to have our best interests. And so what I've seen over the years and all that stuff of the introduction of what that means is that I am making sure behind the scenes that we're making sure behind the scenes that our clinical trials are ran for safety and efficiency and effectiveness for the subjects, making sure that we are following all rules, regulations to make sure you are safe. And I've seen it from both sides where obviously I'm behind the scenes, but I've also seen how we get involved in the community and how we bring subjects in. So that's kind of just a tidbit of where I fall within clinical trials.
Thank you. Round of applause for Pamela. All right. I'm going to start with you, Pamela, but we're going to open this up as well, Chanel. I think a big thing that we hear a lot at CISCRP is, having trust in clinical research is a really huge part, and especially for communities of color where there's been some historical misgivings and issues that have happened. What's being done, and what's a good place to start for people to better trust the healthcare system, especially when it comes to clinical research?
So let's say you're going to your doctor's office and they start talking about clinical trials. First and foremost, you know you have Google. I mean, you can Google anything. But the biggest thing that I have found over my years is what's called an informed consent. It's this document that, okay, I'm sorry. I have a boisterous voice, so can everyone hear me? Okay, now you can hear me. Okay, great. So an informed consent, and basically what that is, your doctor is going to give this to you, and it's going to tell you about the clinical trial. Now, the great thing about this is over the years, what they've done is it's at a great 8th grade level. That doesn't mean that they don't think you're educated. What it means is they want every single person to be able to understand what they are getting involved in, even down to the amount of blood that will be taken from your body, and if that's going to hurt, right? Or if that's going to cause you some discomfort, or are you going to pass out because maybe you get faint by seeing your own blood? Okay, so to me, that is one of the biggest things that they have changed over the years to make sure that you understand. You need to understand what you're getting involved in. And so if you're going to your doctor and they talk to you about that informed consent, not only are you going to be able to understand what you're reading, but you also can take that home to your family, your friends, another doctor that can also give you a second opinion. So to me, that's huge as far as getting involved and bringing in people of color and making them trust what we're doing is for your best interest.
And Chanel, do you have anything to add when, coming to taking control of your health? What made you feel a trust in the system as a trial participant yourself?
So I'll say first things first. My doctor suggested a clinical trial. When she first suggested it, it was during a time where there was no lupus-specific treatment. I mean, we was taking chemotherapy drugs, we were taking steroids, all these different types of drugs that treated the symptoms but didn't really specifically speak to lupus. And for me, my symptoms were that it was not bad enough that I needed these other drugs, but it was severe enough that these other drugs weren't working. So it felt like there were not many options. And my doctor suggested a clinical trial, and the first thing I told her was HE double hockey sticks, no. And I always say that to start. I was like, no, I am not a guinea pig. I didn't have kids. I'm like, oh no, I'm not gonna. But what eventually made me change my mind was really learning more about it. And learning, I think that the big thing that I always say was the big thing to me is if I no longer wanted to participate, I could say, I don't want to do this anymore. And I think that a lot of times we think we sign on this dotted line and we just sold our bodies away to science. And that was really the thing that made me, that big stack of paper that she just talked about, it is intimidating, but really looking through it and understanding and asking questions was what really made me say, all right, maybe I'll try this. And the interesting thing for me was I'm on the drug right now that I was on a clinical trial for. And so I've watched me be a part of the process and watched people with lupus that now don't know a world where there's no drug specific to lupus. They have an option when they get diagnosed, as opposed to it was like, well, we could give you this. It's like I was directly a part of that, and it means something to me. And it's helping me.
It's helping you, absolutely. I noticed you said that word guinea pig. How many, show of hands, think guinea pig, that term, when it comes to clinical research? If you're a participant and you're a guinea pig.
That was my first thought too. I was like,
Yeah. Okay. Pamela, can you talk a little bit about that sort of misconception when it comes to research that someone's going to be a guinea pig, or other things that you come across, and how we can reframe that discussion?
Yeah, historically we've seen so much that has happened to our people, bottom line. I mean, so and being a woman of color, I understand. But again, we have to, just like with, and I'll frame it like this, with our politics, we've seen change. With our politics, we've seen change. And now with clinical trials, we've seen change. And so again, not to be repetitive, but the first thing is trying to, number one, do you trust your doctor? Okay, so that's a huge thing. If you don't trust your doctor, no problem, find another doctor. Number two, family and friends, get them involved. If you don't understand something, then reach out to family and friends to help you through the process. I can't sit here and say to you that you still won't be nervous, skeptic. But the thing that I believe is huge is that you can stop at any time. Anytime you don't feel comfortable, you can stop. That's what this informed consent, which is a document, yes, that you're signing, yes. However, again, you have rights. You can take that document home. Look over it. Take weeks. You can take weeks, months, as long as you want to feel comfortable. But do your research. She is living proof that, and I know for a fact, I started in rheumatology, so I know what she's talking about. There were no drugs for lupus. And so we had to do research on certain specific drugs until we found that what worked. And she is living proof that it is effective, and that they're not out there doing guinea pigs on black folk. And that's just, I know it's hard to believe, but when you see people that look like myself, that look like her, we're all through healthcare. You've seen it. You've seen it on this panel. You've seen doctors that look like you. Find doctors that look like you, that talk like you, that can speak and explain things in terms that you understand. And then that will help you to trust. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think the other side of it is when I first learned about clinical trials, I didn't understand that there were stages. And so a lot of times we think it's the first stage, like they found this drug, they tested it in some mice, and then they just gave it to me, right? Which is what, like, you're like, yeah, that's my first thought. Each stage is a different level of protocol. Each stage is a different number of people. And each stage is a different expectation. So before it can even come to human trials, it has to be shown that for various reasons, this thing is gonna help and benefit. It cannot kill. No pharmaceutical company wants to kill anybody because stocks will crash. They have a vested interest in making sure that everyone stays alive on their drugs. And I think that learning that helped me a lot. Also learning that if I got sicker for any reason, and truth be told, it could be me being on a clinical trial. It could be that I just got sick because I wasn't taking care of myself. They have to take care of me because I'm on the trial. My health, they have to take care and make sure that I'm okay. And my doctor is still following up with me. I'm still doing the same labs and all of those things. So for me, it required me to I had to know things. I think it's hard when we don't really know, and and Instagram and social media and YouTube, they're not always the most helpful things. And they don't always give the most accurate information. So having to really look and learn and also be open to the idea that what happened back then definitely happened. And let's be real, it didn't happen that far away. But literally, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, okay? Because I'm not a doctor. I tell y'all all this. I'm just a nosy person, and I'm a geek, and I'm a nerd, and I read a lot of things. But tell me if I'm wrong. Some trials now, if they don't have a certain amount of people in them of a different population, that's a problem now, right?
Yeah, it is. And one thing I wanted to say so that maybe you guys can, understand in this terms. Yeah, there are phases, as she was saying. But what happens is it goes into animals first. That's the first stage, okay? Then secondly, there is a first in man, and usually that is healthy subjects. And usually it's a younger population. So it goes through that where these subjects literally stay in the hospital where there's doctors, nurses that watch them around the clock. So these are healthy subjects first. So someone diagnosed with lupus never gets the first phase of the study. So it's in healthy subjects first. So what that does is they get to see, okay, they'll get a headache, they may get nausea, and they're able to see, should this even go to the next phase where I have someone who's diagnosed, let's say, with lupus, okay? So understand that by the time it gets to what's called a third phase, it's for safety and efficacy, which means I want to make sure that if you're taking the medication, that it's going to be safe, that it's going to be effective. So again, and I see the faces, I know, I get it, but you have to look at it this way. I'm taking the first phase of a healthy subject who has none of these. So by the time it gets to you, the person that maybe has lupus, you already know what kind of side effects you're gonna get. And the biggest thing I want to take out, and I know you have more questions, but the one thing I want to take out, when you take Tylenol, somebody went through a study for just Tylenol. And if you ever look at the side effects of Tylenol, you probably even wouldn't want to take that. And I'm going to say there's a caveat to that. But when you have a headache or if you have some illness, you want to take it to get rid of it. So everybody is different. So this whole audience, we may take Tylenol, nothing happens. But you may take Tylenol, you'll get a headache. And then you may take Tylenol and you get upset stomach. It doesn't mean that the medication isn't effective. It just means that we're all human beings and it affects us differently. So if you think about it in the perspective of, we had drugs that went through all these different phases that we just talked about. But if it wasn't for those phases, you wouldn't be here happy and healthy. So somebody's got to do it. And everybody in this group has a grandmother, has an aunt, has an uncle that is going through some type of, whether it's cancer, lupus, something like that. And at the end of the day, if it wasn't for that drug that they're taking, they may be dead. And guess what? If it wasn't for me or if it wasn't for you who went through that study, maybe your family member wouldn't be here. So I'll end with that.
And that's like absolute. I think I don't have any children, but I think about it like I have lupus. That's something that I could pass on. I am so glad I'm not passing on a world where there's no treatment if my child is born with lupus. And so that's a part of the conversation too, this idea of paying it forward, this idea of generations, and how, of course, it is scary. I mean, let's be real, in mine, I know you all got a whole demonstration on how to inject something. For mine, I had to do that for myself. That was my first time stabbing myself with a needle. Goodness. But to know that like what I went through means something and allows other people to be okay. And also that, you know, as a person of color, as a black woman, as a black Caribbean American woman from Brooklyn, BK all day, and that that I was represented, and I can't remember any of the questions you're gonna ask, but I might be stumping all your question. I remember there was a medication that came out in it was a trial for it, and it came out. And when it finally came out, one of the interesting things, and you can maybe, like I said, I'm always just passing off to the real learned people, but they said it didn't work that well in Black people. And that's what the conversation became, and I think that's why we're probably talking about diversity now, is imagine like they finally come out with a drug for your illness, and they never got to test it in people like you, look like you. The main people that are signing up for clinical trials are white men. And that's what they're basing on what they give us. And while we're all human, I know that there's different things that I have to consider for my body, things that happen to women, things that happen in my family history. So I think that that's also another important factor. Is like I want to give back to my community, because if nobody does it, then we won't have progress.
That's a great point, and a round of applause, absolutely. And kind of elaborating on that a little bit more, Pamela, can you talk about what the industry is doing to help to increase diverse representation in trials, and why that's so important?
So first and foremost is attending summits like this, asking for volunteers. Pharma has come a long way. When I first started, I'm like one in a bunch of hundreds. And now more, whether it's Hispanics, whether it's Blacks, Asians, there are so many more, and they literally are recruiting. And I'm not talking about for studies, I'm talking about to work in pharma. So that's where it starts. You have to recruit people that look like us, who understand us, who live in the same communities as us, so that we can have this dialogue. You can't have someone who doesn't understand the history and how we are afraid, and even with, let's think of COVID and the whole debacle with that sometimes, that in our minds we thought they were after us and they were going to give us this medication and it was going to harm our communities. If we don't know, if there's no one that's working in that field that can talk to it, then that's the first thing. Employing more people of color within pharma. So that's the first thing. Second thing, having sponsoring fairs. So as you can see, there's right behind me, plenty of pharma on here. So they're sponsoring in areas of color. So that's another thing. Trying to do research, right? Because research not just for medications. It's for, okay, how can we reach the areas? So getting at research, okay, is it through paper? Is it through, online? Is it through what we're doing here? So I really believe that and even within pharma now, they even have, I'm part of what's called B1. So I work for a company called Otsuka. I'm literally part of a group that is for Black employees of that particular pharma group, which is Otsuka. And then we have other members, it's not just for Blacks, but it gives us an opportunity. Okay, so how can we work on hiring? Then how can we work on diversity within our clinical trials? So I really think within pharma, they are really working on diversity, but also not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. And part of Otsuka this is me being here, literally volunteering. I'm in Maryland, sorry, but we lived in Brooklyn when I was very young, but I don't claim it. But still, the point is that I think it's important. Otsuka thinks it's important that I came here from Maryland to have this conversation with you.
And I think for me, one of the cool things I've done advocacy around just lupus, not just clinical trials. This is one of the things I speak about. So don't think anybody paid me to come here and be like, yes, everyone sign up. Like, no, this is a volunteer. I care about this. But one thing that I thought was really important, many years ago, a lot of times I get to meet researchers. And we watch the news and we think about pharma as this really, really big, bad thing. And I can't speak to what happens on the head, but I meet the people that are actually the researchers. And that's been so rewarding to me, because you meet them and you'll talk to them and they're like, I have an aunt named that has lupus, and that's why I do this research. I have a grandma that had cancer, and that's why I do this research. And a lot of times the researchers and doctors that I've met that work in these things are personally connected. And so I think that that plays a big role for me, you know, to see pharma really think about, like, how do we really, how do we bring diverse people into our community to recognize, like, hey, y'all, that's not gonna work. You know, this is not gonna work. Or, hey, why are you recruiting that way? We really need to get this population over here. And having, like, people like you be advocates inside of the companies, and to really, really make sure that everybody's doing what's right. And truth be told, other side, once again, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm asking questions like you all, so hopefully I help with the questions. One of the things is, like, in order for a drug to be passed, they have to meet certain criteria to be passed. So if they don't follow any of those rules, like if anything that happened, like the things that happened that allowed the syphilis experiment, which we used to call the Tuskegee experiment, but Tuskegee's like, hey, we got more than just syphilis over here. Like, we don't use that term anymore. But the syphilis experiment or these other things, if they do anything that looks like anything like that, that drug won't even come to market. So I think that those are the things that, like, I think it's important that we have people to advocate for our communities, to make sure it's not a predatory, like, we just gonna come here when we need blood and then we're gonna leave. And having a lot of advocates has been really, really rewarding to me to watch those people.
Yeah, please.
No, I saw a lady.
That's okay. I think to that point, if we can talk a little bit more, you know, we touched on trust and touched on Tuskegee's a little bit. What are some of the safeguards that are in place if somebody is not quite sure and wants to make sure that they're protected? What are things that are being done to make sure that they are safe if they participate?
I won't regurgitate and say the informed consent, but that is a huge one. But also, before you can get into the study, you have to have criteria that you have to meet. So there's going to be questions. So you have what they call screening, and then the screening is going to say, do you have this, that? So your doctor, and if this is not, let's just say this is not your primary doctor, it's a different doctor that you're going for the clinical research trial, they're going to ask you questions. Do you take this medication? Do you have high blood pressure? And they're going to take your vitals. So it's not just like they're guessing, like, oh, you tell me what your last blood pressure was. No, they're literally going to take your blood pressure. And there may be a criteria that says if you have high blood pressure, like 140/90, you can't even be in the study. So it's like checking off a box. As soon as they meet that box that says you can't be in the study, even if you wanted to be in the study, you can't do it because they're safeguarding, making sure, and again, I'm using this as an example, that someone with high blood pressure isn't in this study that's going to hurt them. So I think that's huge, because I think historically we again have this idea that they're just going to say, hey, you come on and be in my study, and because you're black, yeah, we're going to do a guinea pig. It does not work that way. They have to ask you your medical history. They have to do EKGs. And I know you didn't ask this, but I just want to say, so let's say you don't have a primary. Being in a clinical trial also allows you to have a medical doctor that is going to, you have to have a physical before you even get into a study. So EKGs, blood pressures, blood is taken. And they're going to go through chemistries and CBCs, and I know that's stuff, but stuff to make sure that you don't have low white cell or high blood cell count. So there's a whole host of things that go on. So that's part of the safeguarding that's been basically implanted basically into clinical trials.
Perfect.
There's one more thing. I was going to say the other side of it is I've definitely been rejected from clinical trials. Like, it's real. Like, one, I have lupus. I know I don't look like it. But lupus itself, like, is this thing that even though I might be well, right, I might look well, internally I might not be feeling good. My levels might be low. Different things are wrong. And so I've had situations where I was like, can I be in this clinical trial? And they're like, ooh, no, this is too low. You got to figure that out. We don't want you. And so it is like just to affirm that literally, and it's actually something that, funny enough, is a problem for a lot of my friends that have lupus, is that random reasons that they're protecting us so much that sometimes we can't even get in the trial. But that's part of why it's so important for us to have more people try. Because while I might not be able to get in one, you might have better luck. You might be in a better state or a better fit for a clinical trial than I am, and you might be able to be the one that helps bring something new to market, bring something new that can help others like me.
All right. Well, I'd like a round of applause for our speakers today, for everybody's time. I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions if anybody has them. I know there's some microphones. Just the one question, it sounds like. All right, Deirdre, take it away.
I was gonna say, you're gonna give my aunties over there. Give it to my aunties over there.
I just want to clarify something. You're saying that the trials are always the third trial and always racially diverse?
That's part of the problem. They're trying to make it racially diverse. That's the problem. It's based on who signs up. I'm sorry, I should let you to do this because you are the expert. But no, the first one is, what was explained is that by the time you get to third, different trials are different numbers. The idea is that at the end of the day, every stage, you want every stage to be diverse, period. Because you need diversity to be able to figure out if this works for everybody.
But the issue with having the diversity and I want to make sure, because you're saying by the third, I don't want you to get confused about the numbers. At the end of the day, they need diversity. So the first, when I said first in man, they want diversity in that as well. Like, it's not, oh, once we get to the third, we want diversity. It's diversity throughout the trials. Now, obviously, with rats and mice, it is what it.
Okay, well, you said that first then you said it was done on healthy individuals, right? That would be the second, right? Then you said that's when the trial starts. So you mean like the third?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, no, let me make that very clear. So, animals, first in man, and then they have several, they have like a phase 2, which is the next step up from a phase 1, which has the first in man is what they call it. So it's never been studied in any person. So I don't want to confuse you too much, because there's not a trial like, oh, I get to 3 and it's more diverse, or this is the one I can be in. You could be in the first one if you wanted, if you met the criteria. So you could be the first in man if you wanted to, as long as you fit the criteria. Does that?
Okay, we have our last question here, and you can speak to them afterwards.
Ladies, how many forms of lupus is there? And what is lupus? Because my sister has lupus, but she has it in the hair, and it's like little pink and brown spots. And I've never known her to take any medication for it.
Everybody's lupus is different. First things first, everybody's lupus. Lupus is an autoimmune disease where the immune system is overactive and attacks the body itself. It attacks different people different ways, different parts of the body. It can attack your skin. There's subcutaneous. There's systematic, which means it can attack my heart or my brain, or it attacks different people. And so it looks different for different people. Some people need more medication. I know people who go into remission, they have it, and then they don't have symptoms that bad for some reason. So it varies from person to person, as well as the medication that's taken. But if you want more information about lupus, feel free to see me. I'll be hanging out outside if you want any more information, and I'm glad to talk with you about it.
All right. Thank you again, everybody. Thank you so much to our speakers and to the Black Health Matters team. Thank you.
Thank you so much.